Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I'm joined today by Katherine. Katherine, can you please share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. I'm Katherine Johnson. I am with Storj, where I am Chief Governance Officer, and I'm also the Executive Chair of Storj Institute. Storj has an enterprise-grade distributed cloud platform, and a few years ago, we started Storj Institute, which is focused on creating greater inclusion in emerging technology.
Excellent. And tell me a little bit about the flexible distributed work setup at Storj.
So at Storj, we've been remote since our inception. I
Hmm.
joined the company in 2019. I was an advisor first, and then joined the company in
Hmm.
2019 as its first general counsel and head of people. And so at the time, we were a smaller company, kind of small and scrappy and doing things a little bit informally. Over time, obviously, we've grown. And it's been interesting to see how a remote first company addresses
Hmm.
some of the challenges of growth and also being distributed while enjoying the benefits of it too.
I know you recently transitioned to a governance role, the Chief Governance Officer at Storj. Can you tell me a little bit more about the governance implications of remote work?
Sure. Similar to some of the challenges of a distributed team, um, a company that is distributed is going to have some of the same challenges as a company that has people going into the office every day, but sometimes they're more pronounced. And
Mm-hmm.
that's simply because in a distributed environment, we don't get the benefit of people just talking to each other casually. There's not the kind of meeting around, going for coffee or doing, informal exchanges. And
Mm-hmm.
so the flow of information becomes ever more important. And when you have a distributed workforce, as we do, that is not just distributed by having people in different states within the United States, but is
Mm-hmm.
globally distributed
Mm-hmm.
as we are. I think it's important to be very thoughtful about how we manage people,
Mm-hmm.
how we encourage communication, and how we support all of our people. Because you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine that when you have a company like ours that is has team members all over the world, that there are very different styles of communication that if someone is not exposed to or hasn't been exposed to before, they can be confused. What might be, in one person's opinion, just being direct because
Mm-hmm.
they're in a country where that is the standard. You just say
Mm-hmm.
what you need and say what you mean very directly. If you have a person from another culture or environment where it's important to be more deferential and,
Mm-hmm.
kind of couch things a little bit, then there can be a
Mm-hmm.
communication breakdown very quickly, very
Mm-hmm.
easily, especially because so much of our communication depends on the written word. The same
Mm-hmm.
way that if you're, I'm sure it's happened to you, it's happened to all of us. You can be talking to someone you know very well or texting with them, someone you know very well, and who you understand and who you've spent many years with, and there still can be some confusion about the
Sure.
intent. So that lack of context makes it more challenging
Mm-hmm.
for companies that are distributed. However, the values of distribution are just so enormous that
Mm-hmm.
it's worth taking that extra time to put in processes in place or programs or whatever supports we can have to get
Mm-hmm.
the value and the benefit of that distributed workforce. Now, what I mean by that is
Mm-hmm.
one of the challenges that we've seen in Web 2 is that a lot of the technology was created by groups of people who were not very diverse. And in creating the technology, a lot of times samples that they used, whether it was photographs or
Mm-hmm.
whatever inputs, were limited by their own experience. And maybe they
Mm-hmm.
didn't think about using images of different colors, different races,
mm,
different ethnicities, different languages. And maybe they didn't think about, is this particular program going to be difficult for someone who has, you know, uh, sight problems with their sight or difficult
mm,
hearing? Are they going to be able to use it the same way someone else might?
mhm,
And in short, a lot of the challenges and failures that we saw of Web 2 resulted from that. Now, the implications can be mild and minor and simply
mhm,
be, that some people have a harder time with the technology, harder time using the
mm,
tools. Or it can be so grave as to deprive people of, their most basic civil liberties.
mm,
So these are really very serious concerns and issues that we had with Web 2.
mhm,
And, at the time, we were looking at the Internet of Things and realizing that the more uh, the more we build, the more we develop these technologies, the more they're going to
mhm,
have a direct role and a significant one in our lives. We're now
mhm,
talking about AI, which is even more drastically going to
mhm,
be impacting our lives. So this question of how is this technology going to impact people? It's really critical that we have people with different perspectives,
mhm,
socioeconomic perspectives, different experiences to be thinking about what that
mm,
technology looks like in their own lives. Now, for example, I am a single mom, a divorcee. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am part of the sandwich generation. I support
mm,
my mom, and I also have a teenager. Some of my colleagues right now are working out of Ukraine, out of their
mm,
home offices, showing up to work every day with very different needs and circumstances than me. I have colleagues in Ghana who have very
mm,
different circumstances and needs than me. All a company is, aside from, a great product, which we have, which addresses a lot of the other issues around emerging technology, including sustainability, security, privacy, all of those. We've got that. We've
mm,
got that taken care of with our product, right? But the company itself, it's just a collection of people. And if you're
mm,
not identifying the needs of those individuals, then the company itself is not going to be successful in how they communicate in order to support that important product or
mm.
platform and to continue developing it, in a responsible way. That communication is going to break down and it's going to impact the product, it's going to impact your customers, and it's going to impact the well-being of your employees and your team members.
Makes a lot of sense, but unfortunately, we're right now in an environment where inclusivity is becoming less welcomed, with some political backlash and some activist backlash. How do you think companies should be handling that who are trying to think about inclusivity and are talking about it, and for whom it is a customer-centric need, but who do face, let's say, being a supplier to a government that is cracking down on concerns about inclusivity?
It's an important and a timely question. I would argue that nobody is against inclusivity.
Mm,
I think that there is a notion that some of the efforts around inclusivity have swung too far one way,
mm,
or they're not really understood. Because when you think about it, who would really outwardly, openly say, I don't believe that people should feel included? I don't think even the President of the United States could say that with a straight face, possibly. However, it is just the notion of it
mm,
that has gotten tainted. And because of
mm,
that, I think it's really important that we talk about what's underlying things and
mm,
not focus too much on the labels that we give them, right?
mm,
In order for a company to be successful, its people need to be productive,
mm,
satisfied, healthy, able to communicate with their colleagues. All of those things go to inclusion, because if a person isn't
mm,
feeling included and is not included, then they're not going to be any of those things. They're not going to have a sense of safety. They're not going to feel
mm,
comfortable communicating. They're not going to, and be productive. And
Hmm.
my background is compliance. And
Hmm.
so I spent a lot of years working with the world's largest banks. And they were usually, under some regulatory remediation or program and had to
Hmm.
bring their programs back up to standard.
Hmm.
Before that, I worked for a law firm, Fried Frank, where we did SEC enforcement actions,
Hmm.
defense against enforcement actions. We worked with stock exchanges. And
Hmm.
so I saw a lot of environments where there were groups of individuals who were looking at a system and wondering, okay, what went wrong here? One
Hmm.
of the problems was that a lot of times people don't feel comfortable saying, I don't understand this. This doesn't look right to me. And that was
Hmm.
how a lot of financial frauds have been missed because
Hmm.
people have been unwilling to ask that question. And the same premise applies when you're building a product. Every person in the company needs to be able to say, I don't understand how this works, or I
Hmm.
think I see a problem here. They need to be comfortable to speak up and say that because
Hmm.
that's what's going to create the better product and avoid disasters, frankly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up, where do you see the governance of remote work, distributed work going in the future? We've talked about where it is. We talked about some current challenges. What do you see as the future in the next couple of years, and what should we be paying attention to?
I think that the role of governance is going to become ever more, not just important, but I think there will be a greater awareness
Hmm.
of its importance. The same way that societies can change very quickly and lose some of their safeguards and protections when we don't pay attention
Hmm.
to governance, companies can face the same
Hmm.
fate. And it's through the structures that we have in place, from which come our policies, our procedures, our coordinated and organized approach to decision making, to
Hmm.
conflict resolution, to the development of our platforms and products. When you have all of that in place, things run much more smoothly, and a
Hmm.
company or any organization is much more likely to be successful. If that structure is founded on values that are clearly communicated and embraced, and socialized and reviewed every so often to make sure
Hmm.
that they're still appropriate, then you're going to have a greater sense of buy-in and understanding of, why we have the approach that
Hmm.
we do, why we do the things we do, how we make the decisions that we make. And in a
Hmm.
remote environment, that becomes all that much more important so that
Hmm.
people continue to feel connected to each other, to the company, to its aims, to its values, to its
Hmm.
mission, to its identity. And I think that because we're seeing corollaries all over the world of how systems can break down
Hmm.
and protections that people have in place can suddenly be gone. I think
Hmm.
that there will be a greater attention paid to governance, to corporate governance, and to getting it right.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, Catherine. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, as always, email me at gleb@disasteravoidanceexperts.com.